Hello, welcome back to my channel. I am Monae and you are watching Life is Monae. I know that I have not uploaded in about 3 weeks, maybe a month at this point. So sorry guys, I was so busy with school. I have officially finished. My actual graduation is tomorrow, November 7th, and so I am excited to be doing some reading. I have a really long TBR for the holiday season, but I cannot wait to update you guys on the Finding New Favorite series that I've been doing on my channel and the romances that I've been reading and like the rabbit hole that has led me down. But today, I want to update you guys on some of the books that I was reading towards the end of school and give you a wrap up in this month that I've been missing and tell you guys what I have read. Okay, so the first book that I want to talk about is going to be All of Us Villains. I was lucky enough to get an arc of this sent to me from Tor, and I could not be more grateful for it because I had such a good time. The arcs for me have been hitting this year. I don't know what it is, but almost every arc that I've received have been a 5 out of 5 stars for me. I ended up giving this one a 4.5 out of 5, and I know that that's not against them. I'll explain why and what disappointed me about the book, but that's not their fault. I understand why they did it. It's just I wanted more. Okay, so in this book, I don't know if you guys have seen it everywhere, but it's kind of being sold as like a Hunger Games retelling, and I guess it is like that a little bit. So we have this town where 7 very prestigious and prominent, powerful families live, and a couple hundred years ago, I want to say like the blood trials have been happening every 20 years for 800 years. So about 800 years ago, magic was dying, or at least high magic was dying. Now magic exists everywhere in the world. Like low level magic is something that's accessible to everyone, but high magic is not. The world has not seen it in centuries. They do not know that it still exists. The only people that know that high magic is still accessible is these 7 families, because what they did when high magic was dying out was they kind of formed this pact and this curse, and so every 20 years or once a generation, every one of the 7 families have to send in a champion to what is called the blood trials. And in the blood trials, these champions will compete with magic and other stuff, other weapons as well, to win, and they have to win by being the sole victor and murdering the other 6 contestants. And the winner of the blood trials, that person's family will control the high magic for the next 20 years until another generation is put forth. These 7 champions are competing in the blood trials, and they are fighting to the death for the control of magic. Now the curse does have a lot of stipulations to it. For example, if no one participates in the trial, like if there's no victor, then no family gets control over high magic. They will all have to live without it for the next 20 years or so. Another rule to the curse is that if a family does not put in a champion to the blood trials, then one random person in their family of trial age will die at will, and they have no control over it. So the best thing for them to do is to actually compete and try to win, because there really is no way to escape the blood trials. There is one person in this book who feels like the curse can be broken, and they're trying to break the curse, but no one's really helping them, because as the book is called, All of Us Villains, everyone in this book is a villain. Literally everyone is a villain. Even the person who's trying to break the curse is kind of technically a villain too. Everyone is vicious and malicious and like relentless in their quest to be the champion, and they're all again fighting to the death. They're willing to do whatever it takes to be the winner of these blood trials for their family. However, this year is very different from all the other blood trials because someone has written a tell-all book. So now the rest of the world and the government is involved in these blood trials because 1, no one knew high magic existed. 2, it is only being controlled by one of the 7 families per generation. And 3, they're fighting in this tournament to the death. And so in this tell-all book, everybody gets their hands on it. It's a talk of the town. And so everybody's coming to this very small town. And the people who live in this town, they had no idea that the blood trials was ever happening because it's like it happens in secret. But now everyone knows. So we have people that are coming to the town. They're trying to riot and protest against the trials. We have the government who's getting involved, trying to pick who wins the blood trials, but the blood trials cannot be manipulated. Everyone has to go in there and fight honestly, as honest as they can be, because again, everybody's willing to stoop to whatever level they can, and they're all villains. Now, what I found most interesting about the book is that there are pretty detailed rules and nuances to the magic system. There's a difference between spells and curses. There's different levels to how you cast a spell depending on like how strong you are. And also a spell maker or a curse maker is not the same as a curse caster. We have so many different contestants that have different strengths. One of my favorite characters in the book is a strong spell caster, but they are not a strong spell maker. And it's so interesting to watch each character have their own weakness, but also still be vicious in their quest to be a winner. Now, one of the reasons why I did not give this book 5 out of 5 stars is because although there is violence in this book, it is a bit gory and detailed. It is a bit vicious. Not a lot of people died. Like, I wanted more chaos. I wanted more people to die. However, there are only 7 contenders, and this book is a duology. And so, one is YA. I feel like for it to be a YA book, it was definitely gory and like brutal for a YA, but I wanted more deaths. I understand, however, why they did not do that, because in the second book, we need more people to be alive for there to even be a second book. So I know, and I'm hoping that when we get the wrap up to this book next year, that we'll have way more deaths. We are following, of the 7 prominent families, we follow 4, like, individual POVs. Now, you will get to see the other 3 characters interact throughout the book, but you don't get their POV exactly. So I do feel like it is a great balance between following multiple characters, and each character is very nuanced and characteristic. They're very different, and like, you know them, like you get to really understand them, and you get to see them react in different situations. And I feel like they did a really good job of making each character their own person without overwhelming you, because at first following 4 characters can be overwhelming, especially because like they're interacting with different people and they're all coming from very powerful families. Highly recommend. It's going to be a top read of the year for me. I want to wait until more people get their hands in it before I start giving spoilery things, because again, at the time that I'm filming this, it's not actually out. But my friend Alana also got an arc of this book. She read it and I think she gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It is a fun time, especially for a YA. So this book is a part of when I was reading different thrillers, and that is going to be the 22 Murders of Madison May. I have this little tab in here from when I was reading it. I read this with Chanel and we both really enjoyed this book. And what's crazy is that in hindsight, after like being done with it for months, it is living rent-free in our head and we keep thinking about it. Now, this is a different type of thriller because it is more of like an adrenaline rush, if that makes any sense. And also the synopsis can be very confusing. I'm going to try to explain this in the best way without giving away too much. We have this character. We don't exactly follow her per se, but she is Madison May. And in one version of reality, Madison May is an actress, and she's an actress in this movie, and the movie premieres, and one kid is like watching it, and he becomes enraptured in her, and he's like, I have to meet her. He becomes obsessed in a very like obsessed fan kind of way. And so when he tries to meet her, things don't actually work out for him. He has this ability to jump timelines, or to jump to alternate universes. And so this is how we get to the 22 Murders of Madison May. Because he loves her so much, he is using his ability to jump into different versions of the world to always seek her out. But the problem is that, you know how people will say, in another life I would have been a teacher, in another life I would have been a painter. This is literally happening with Madison May. He cannot control which version of the world he jumps into. So whenever he runs into her, she is Madison May, but she's not his Madison May. Sometimes she's a student, sometimes she's an understudy, sometimes she's a teacher, and he's like finding her, but she's not the right version of herself. And he's so consumed with her and so focused on her that he gets so enraged that he ends up killing her. The problem here is that there's an endless amount of versions of the world or the universe for him to jump into. So this girl, Madison May, unbeknownst to her, will keep dying in different versions by a guy that she's never met because he keeps jumping timelines to kill her. I know that sounds so crazy, but that's part of why I love this book, because that synopsis is like so different from anything that I've ever read. Like if this was a movie, I would have ate this up. So we have this one journalist by the name of Felicity. Felicity is sent to cover one version of Madison, who is a real estate agent, and the kid ends up killing her. And so she is on this journey where when he jumps portals or jumps timelines, whatever, somehow she gets caught up in it, and she's now caught in an alternate version of her own life. So it's the same job and the same friends and the same boyfriend, but in one version, her boyfriend is a cook and he's a really good chef. In another version, they eat out every night. In one version, he works out a lot. In another version, he doesn't. So it's like she has this parallel between like, is it the same? Like, is it still my boyfriend if he's not the version of him that I fell in love with? So there is Felicity, and she's trying to catch the killer of Madison May and stop him. And so you follow her on her journey to prevent further murders of Madison May. It does take a while because, again, she does die like 22, 24 freaking times. One of the downfalls of jumping timelines is that you can never go back, because whatever timeline you existed in, you're now gone. That version of you in that timeline has now jumped to another. And so you can't exist in the same timeline twice. Like there can't be two versions of you. This is also going to be a top read of the year for me. Again, I know it's very different, but it doesn't actually sound like a thriller, but seeing Madison die in so many different ways and like trying to figure out, like you get to see her in a different version of her life and she's interacting with different people and you're like, which one is going to be the kid? So it's like this sense of adrenaline when you're reading her chapters about her, you know, about to be murdered, and she's like running away from a creeper and someone saved her, and that savior of her from the creeper ends up being the kid who is about to murder her again. So there were so many moments where I was just like, Madison, girl, like get it together. But again, Madison is in different versions of reality, so she does not know that she has a stalker. Like, she can't stop it because she doesn't know. Highly recommend that you guys check this book out. I enjoyed it again. Chanel enjoyed it. And we read a lot of thrillers together this year, but this is definitely one of our favorites. So the next book that I want to review is different because I don't always review nonfictions, but I just love this one so much that I have to talk about it, and that is going to be Cultish by Amanda Montell. Now, this book is about the language of fanaticism. It talks about cults and how we view it and how they used to be in the past, like with the Manson family, and things that are cultish today that don't necessarily fit the description of a literal cult, but they share some of the similarities of a cult. And so we cover everything from Starbucks to Lululemon to CrossFit, like anything that you might think that would be cultish. She covers, including multi-level marketing schemes. Even religion is touched in a little bit, and like how something can go from being seen as a religion to seen as a cult, and how they use language to like snatch people up. And this is hands down one of the best nonfiction books that I've read this year, because it definitely had me like, you know what? Like, you are right. Some things are really cultish. And it's not a book that's supposed to scare you away from all things cultish, but just make you aware of how easy it is to get caught up in things that are cultish. And like one of the things that really stuck out with me from this book, and it's about the language, is how different communities have different lingo and like terms that they use. Like CrossFit has its own language. Like if you've ever been to Starbucks and you're not like a regular person that go to Starbucks, those people sound crazy when they start talking about all the different drinks that they make and the people who collect Starbucks cups, and like it really does sound like a cult. And one of the ways that you can acknowledge that is that there's language and this way that they communicate with each other that an outsider would not be able to, and how easy it is to get swept up in like colloquialisms that you don't think much of, but it is kind of cultish if you think about it. Highly recommend this book because there's so many things that she talks about, and her father actually was raised on a commune in a cult, and so I feel like it's very nuanced and like understanding. It does not judge anyone who's ever been caught up in cults. There are multiple people in this book that she has interviewed in terms of being in a cult, and I'm talking everything from like Taylor Swift fans to like Beyonce's Beehive. Like, highly recommend this book. I don't really rate nonfiction books, but I gave this one 5 out of 5 because it is so eye-opening. And when I wrote my thesis for school, I actually quoted this book in my research paper. That's how much of a takeaway I had from this book. So if you're looking to get into more nonfiction before the year is up, or if you're like me and you're a fan of cultish things, highly recommend. The next book that I recently read is going to be Dawn of Wonder. Now, this is a self-published book, and I ended up picking this up on a whim. I did not know anything about this book. The cover just gave me classic fantasy vibes, and so I did not know it was an indie author until like I got home and was trying to find the publishing company on the side of the book, and there was none. But this is one of the most emotionally invested books that I've been in all year in terms of like a main character. Now, this book is extremely slow. Extremely slow. So I don't know if I recommend it. It is a coming of age story about an anti-hero. And so any classic, if you're like a fantasy reader and you've read the classics before, you know that most coming of age stories are super slow. And this is book 1 to what is supposed to be a series. So while a lot of stuff does happen, nothing happens in terms of like the overall plot. And so for that reason alone, I don't know if I can recommend you read a 800-page book where you're just following this kid and it's like, for what? Because nothing happens plot-wise. However, I freaking love the kid in this book. And like when I went on Goodreads, that was what I was like seeing people complain about the most, is that nothing really happens. This is a very character-based story. And if you're not invested in Aiden, then I don't see you enjoying this book. I would definitely test it out on audio first. I didn't read the audio. I did not listen on audio, but I've seen it on Audible. But most of us real fantasy readers out there understand that sometimes books are just excessively big and long for no reason. So we have this character, this kid named Aiden. Aiden is in this village, in this world, and these kind of like slave traders come to his town and they end up taking his best friend. And so there is this deep-seated hatred he has for these people who live almost like a world away, and he is determined to get revenge one day. But Aiden has suffered a lot of PTSD growing up. His father is extremely abusive to his mother, and his father is extremely abusive towards him. And a lot of things occur that trigger his PTSD that causes him to become a shell of himself. And that really got me in this book because there are so many moments where Aiden is the perfect kid. So he's like very spontaneous and bold, and he has like the perfect mind for critical thinking. And so you see so many moments where like you're so proud of him because he's such a prodigy of a kid, but also there's moments where like his dad triggers him or something will trigger him to remind him of the violence that he suffered at the hands of his father that causes him to break down. And so you watch him go through so many moments where he's growing up. He ends up going to this academy school to be a warrior or like a military general. So he's going through all these different type of military trainings, and you see that he had the perfect mind to be a legion or a battalion commander. And like he can come up with stuff on the slide and you just become so attached to him. But then even towards the end of the book, there's so many moments where like he keeps breaking down and like it hurts and it's gut-wrenching to witness. But however, if you are someone who understands PTSD on a deeper level, you will see that there are people who will go through changes in life and overcome so many things, and then there's always that small trigger that breaks them back down. And every time that happened to my baby Aiden, I just kept crying because I'm just like, we've come so far and you face so many things, and still we are not able to overcome this trauma from our childhood. And it was just an emotionally comforting story, and it was definitely emotionally gut-wrenching as well. And by the end of the book, Aiden sets off to finally pursue revenge from these flesh traders who stole his childhood friend, which is Corey. And what I also love about this is that there's really not a romance between Aiden and Corey. They are genuinely friends. Like, she is the one person that he can lean on and depend on, and they're like 9 and 10 years old. Like, it's no romance here. Maybe it might be in the next couple of books, but the determination he had to save his friend for the sake of like, this is just his friend, like this is his person. It was just I loved it. I don't recommend it to you guys because, again, nothing happens. I just told you at the end of the book, like, you see him get this fire under him in the beginning and you see him want revenge, and then by the end of the book he actually sets out to try to pursue revenge. So you're just reading 800 pages of sappy sadness, and it's just gonna be so sad. He does make friends along the way, so I do love the found family aspect, and I will be joining all the people who are waiting for book 2 to come out by this author. Again, it's independently published, so no time to tell over when we're gonna get book 2, but this is definitely something that I read for myself that I'm pretty sure other people will probably hate, and I do not care because it was for me and I loved it. So another book that I read was Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff. This is another chunker, and I will say that, like, the book itself is relatively good, and some may call it a masterpiece. It may be a top read of the year for a lot of people, and it is more than likely well deserved. For me, however, my enjoyment of the book dropped every 100 or so pages, and it was just like reading a tomb. It was so darn long, so long, and I don't understand. And, like, this may be a small spoiler, so brace your ears, but the entire overall plot in this book includes a chosen one. However, we are not following the chosen one. We are witnessing what's happening to the chosen one through the eyes of our main character. He is telling a story about how he came to know the chosen one. But we follow him from the time he screams wah, wah, wah into this world. We are following him from birth, darn near. Maybe not birth, maybe that's literal, but, like, we're following him from, like, his literal childhood, and he does not meet the chosen one until he's, like, almost 30. I don't understand why we had to follow him throughout his entire life, just for the whole point of the book to be about somebody else. It doesn't sit right with my spirit. It upsets me. Now, it is entertaining. There are some gory moments. There are some moments of sex. There are political intrigue. There is really great world building and prose. And it has, again, all of those things that you may love when you read this book. It's not a bad book. It's not a bad book. I just feel like if the moral of the story was going to be about a chosen one, we should have followed the chosen one. And then what upset me even more is that one of his friends meets the chosen one long before him. And so when he finally catches up with an old friend, that friend is involved with the chosen one. And so, even more so, why couldn't we have followed the friend who has been following the chosen one for longer than he has? And he spends maybe 10 minutes with the chosen one in total. Maybe it'll make sense in book 2. It is a trilogy, but yeah, that's all I got. That's pretty much, I make it make sense. The math isn't mathing, the logic isn't logicking. It is a good book. It's just really damn long. And at the end, I felt like it was really damn long for no damn reason. Because the book, overall, the story in the background, it wasn't about him. He was cool or whatever. He was cool. He alright. He could sit with us at lunch, but he's not the chosen one. At least in Dune. Dune is an excessively long book, but it's about Paul, and you follow Paul. There's no words. I don't know where my copy of the next book is, so I'm just going to put a picture up. The next book that I want to talk about is Darius the Great Is Not Okay. I also really enjoyed this book. I feel like it covered heavy topics in the same way that Dawn of Wonder did, and I was emotionally connected to Darius. Darius does not fit in with his school friends in a way that, you know, would make his life easier, and his father also has this pressure on him to fit in, and he feels like a lot of the bullying that he's suffering is at the hands of him not trying hard enough to fit in. But they're Persian, and so they go to what is modern day Iran, but they have to travel back home to deal with family matters. And as he's home, he meets a friend who makes him more confident within himself and dealing with a lot of the things that he has to deal with. Again, there are some heavy topics in this book, and I was told that there is kind of like a romance, like a male-male romance in this book. But honestly, while I do see that there are moments where Darius may be queer, it is not the focus of this book. It is not something that he's thinking about at the time. And he genuinely has built this friendship with this character in this book. And they are really good friends. And I think that Darius is confused for most of the book about his feelings towards this friend and whether or not they are platonic or romantic, because he does feel so strongly. So I don't know if I would pitch it as a male-male romance, because a lot of other things do occur in this book, and I did enjoy it, and there is a possibility for a romance between these two characters, but it's not a romantic story at all. It's not the way that I would sell it. I do have the sequel, which is Darius the Great Deserves Better, and so I'm excited to read that. It is on my end of the year TBR to read before the year is up, and maybe we will get more of Darius being more confident in his sexuality, and we get to pursue that a little more. And then I also read the final revival of Opal and Nev, and this was such a fun time. We are following this journalist or like interviewer, she's like a writer, as she interviews people who dealt or interacted with this male-female duo from the 70s, and that is going to be Opal, who is a black woman, and Nev, who is a white man. And she just kind of picks up pieces and clues of like the rise and fall of this duo and like things that happened to them, and the book felt so real. Like, it's crazy to me the book is entirely thought up and fake, because it really felt like real interviews. It felt like real celebrities, a real band, and I felt like Opal was super sassy and like unapologetic, and I enjoyed her as a character. I enjoyed the topics of racism and social equality in this book and what it was like for Opal for the time that she lived in. And I also enjoyed how Opal is portrayed, because she's not light-skinned, she doesn't have beautiful hair. In fact, she actually has alopecia, and so she breaks every barrier that has tried to trap her in. Now, something did happen to the band where there was this negative fallout, and so the final revival is about them doing one last show where they come back and, you know, pick up where they left off and go off with a bang. And so we're following the past, trying to catch up with the present day to figure out what happened to make this band kind of fall apart and break up. And also if the new show is going to be successful, because we don't know exactly what happened in the past to estrange Opal and Nev. So I ended up giving this book a 5 out of 5. It was such a fun read, and it made me want to read more books like that. I still haven't read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but I know that it is set up in the same way, so I definitely plan to read that sometime soon. But I really enjoyed the final revival of Opal and Nev, and I am looking forward to reading more from this author. So, yep, those are all the books that I have read recently. Thank you guys for stopping by my channel. If you plan to pick up any of the books that I've talked about in this video, please comment them down below. Let me know. If anything, All of Us Villains, highly recommend. The 22 Murders of Madison May, highly recommend. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.